Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing?
Good.
Good. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join. How you doing?
Good. It's middle of the week.
What day is it again?
Getting through it. I think it's Wednesday.
Who knows? I wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us tonight, and I'm really excited for everything that we're going to be going through together going ahead. I'm going to give a little bit more time for everybody to join, probably just one more minute. Hi for everybody who's watching.
Tell us where you're watching from.
What was that?
I said to everyone, tell us where you're watching from in the comments.
Yes. So we have a comment box in the bottom. Let us know where you're joining us from. So Kristen and I are both in Boston, but we have people all over joining us. China. Wow. Thank you for being here. What time is it in China right
Yay.
now? Woohoo! We are an international mix right now.
Nice.
So yes, for everybody who's coming in, just let us know where you're coming in from in the comment section. If you have questions for either Kristen or myself, let us know and we will answer them as we see them, hopefully, if not at the end. Yes. Wuhan. Oh, wow. How are you guys doing out there? Hope you're all safe and healthy. And yeah, it's crazy time right now with the quarantine. Everyone's life has changed, habits have changed. We're all being home, being safe, and obviously nutrition is being affected for everybody. And I think that's a really important topic for us to discuss tonight because of COVID and coronavirus right now. So I'm really pleased to announce again that Personal PT is collaborating with Kristen Ciccolini and her company 𝗜𝗚 𝗟𝗃 𝗪𝗚𝗱. As you know, physical therapy, movement, and nutrition go hand in hand with one another. You've heard the phrase 80% diet, 20% exercise. So you can do all the proper movement, but if you're not feeding yourself nutritiously and properly, it does get in the way of having a healthy lifestyle. So for anybody going forward, I will leave Kristen's contact information to get a hold of her through Good Witch Kitchen, as well as her Instagram page, her Facebook page, so you have different avenues of contacting her for all of your nutrition needs. So, Kristen, with that in mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about Good Witch, the services you provide, and we'll go from there.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen Ciccolini, and I am a holistic nutritionist and the founder of Good Witch Kitchen. And like Sarah said, I'm based in Boston with her, and I do private coaching. At one point when we were allowed out in public, I taught cooking classes, and I do a lot of workshops as well. So that's sort of the gist of the things that I offer, but my approach is really focused on intuition and using your intuition with your food habits and food choices, and it's a non-diet approach. So I don't prescribe weight loss. We don't work with that. It's more just focused on what feels good to your body. So that's just a little bit about how I work in a nutshell.
I think it's wonderful because people are going to diet crazes, but I think that using the word diet is very misleading because a diet isn't really a lifestyle change, and you want to have health and healing food as opposed to restricting yourself and being very strict with how you're feeding yourself. So I'm glad that you're doing a lot of that intuition nutrition. It's a mouthful to say.
It's fun to say though.
What exactly is intuition nutrition?
So that is the name of one of my programs, and it's all about nutrition and learning how to feed yourself well, but it also using your intuition and making food choices. So not necessarily following any sort of diet or any food rules which are usually arbitrary and found from, things that our friends do or things we read in a magazine that a celebrity does or Instagram influencer, It's really focused on healing your relationship with food, helping yourself navigate emotional eating, and just really having a better relationship with all kinds of food, not just sugar, not just, the quote unquote bad foods, it's about seeing food as neutral.
I think you talked about two really great things, emotional eating and having a relationship with food. And that's something you can't get with dieting alone.
Right. Yeah. And when you're dieting, you're restricting. So that's not following your body's signals, not understanding or, giving into your body's cues. And people get afraid of that because if they give in to what they actually want, they think they're going to eat a whole box of cookies. And you know what? You might. And it's fine. It's part of the process. And and so what happens is if you're restricting, the pendulum sort of swings in the other direction when you allow yourself to have that sort of stuff again. And eventually it evens out, and eventually you'll start gravitating towards the foods that make you feel good. Sometimes it's the cookies that make you feel good, and that's fine. It's just all part of the process and learning the types of foods that feel good to your body.
And it's a very individualistic process too, which is one of the problems with social media and Instagram. Everybody has access to everything, and what works for one person might not work for another person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people I find are always coming to me with something that they had heard from a friend, or, this worked for this person, so it should work for me, right? But no, it doesn't. Everyone's individual, everyone's different. You wouldn't take the same medication as a friend, right, to get healthy if there's so many other things going on. It's not the same thing. So it can be very individual.
And I think right now, with everyone being at home and doing quarantining, people might resort to emotional eating a little bit more. So what are some tips you would recommend on meal prepping and healthy meal planning for people while they're at home with the coronavirus or with the quarantine?
Yeah, so meal prepping can be part of intuitive eating. I've heard a lot that people think that it can't really fit because, if you're not using your intuition at every given moment. But meal prepping can help you meet your needs consistently throughout the day. It sets you up for success throughout the day so that, you can distinguish between emotional hunger, physical hunger, and make more intentional decisions because you understand what's happening in your body, So meal prepping can definitely be a good tool. And especially now, we're working from home. If you are lucky enough to have your job still and be able to work remotely, a lot of people have this idea about working from home that you just have all this time in the world and, every meal you can make from scratch and you're just going to have this luxurious time. But really, you're still working.
It's the exact opposite.
Yeah, you're still working. So meal prep can serve you there too, like not just when you're out of the house, but, when you have your lunch break or whenever you decide to take lunch, you can actually sit down and have it and not spend all the time cooking it. It's already there for you, and you can just, use that time enjoying it rather than preparing it. So it can really help you, especially at this time when we're trying to get into the groove for working from home, if you haven't done it before, if this is all new to you. So it just helps you keep a little bit more structure and a little bit more in the routine and meets your needs throughout the day.
What's your advice on people creating that structure for themselves? What advice would you give them?
In terms of meals or just working from home?
In terms of meals, while working from home, or even if they're home and lost their job, they probably need that structure even more.
That's true, yeah. When we have all this newfound time on our hands, if you do have all that time, if you find yourself without a job and there's just you have no idea what to do with all your time, it is good to have a sort of a loose structure. Like maybe by 9 o'clock, I have breakfast. By noon, I've worked out. By 3 o'clock, I've read some of my book, I've taken a walk, just think about the goals you want to have throughout the day, maybe some things that you want to get to that you haven't had time to get to. And you don't necessarily have to be like this productive machine, you know, but just having a little bit of structure of like things to look forward to throughout the day can be really helpful for your mental health too. So you're not just sitting there spiraling, thinking like, what am I supposed to do with all my time?
Yeah. Do you think it's important with meal planning, if they meal plan lunch or dinner, it doesn't matter which meal they plan in advance?
I tell people to choose the meal that makes the biggest impact in their day. So whether, you know, maybe it's breakfast for people if you have to get up early and get to work really early. I mean, typically, you know, if you're running out the door, then maybe breakfast would be the option, but you know, we're not running anywhere now, but you know, whatever works in your day. Like for me, it's lunch. Like I'm busy throughout the day. So like I said, I can't just stop and make a meal from scratch. So I like to meal prep my lunches throughout the week. Dinner, I have a little bit more time, so I like to make that from scratch if I can. But you know, you can just pick one, start small. You don't have to meal prep like all 21 meals for the week.
What is your recommendation to avoid when meal prepping?
To avoid, I would say avoid being too rigid about it. You know, sometimes, you know, maybe you don't want to eat the same thing every single day, and that's fine. You know, you're an adult, you can do what you want. But also don't be afraid of like going into the next day's portion if you decide that, you know, you're still hungry and you want more, because portion sizes and again, following your intuition, it's all trial and error. And especially with portion sizes, you know, one size does not fit all. Everyone's different, whether, you know, whatever your just base calorie needs are, your mood, the physical activity for the day, the temperature outside, there's lots of different things going on. So, you know, if I find that a lot of people are like, well, I meal prepped, but I didn't have enough to eat. I'm like, well, why didn't you know, you could go into the rest of the batch, like have tomorrow's batch, just get in there a little bit. And they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. You know,
it'd be like, oh, I'm afraid I won't have anything to eat on Friday. You know,
yeah,
I have to cook Thursday night.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so it takes a little bit of trial and error when you're first starting out with this and really understanding what you need and what works for you. But yeah, what not to do, I would say, is don't be afraid to experiment a little bit with that.
Thank you for that. I think it's a lot of really great advice that you gave. And again, like you said, intuition is listening to your body, how you feel when you're eating what you eat, and paying attention to your mood, what you're eating, the portion size, all of that. Now, while we're all in quarantine, are there any foods that you would recommend or supplement that can help boost our immune system to keep us healthy and strong?
Yeah, so I'll focus on foods because I know it can be difficult to access supplements right now. So I would say focus on colorful foods. So if you are able to get to the grocery store and get some fresh produce, anything really vibrant and colorful will have phytonutrients that support your immune system. So things like citrus, bell peppers, broccoli, leafy greens, whatever it is. And you can get frozen too. So I know some people think that the frozen produce isn't as nutritious as fresh, but you know, it's frozen, or it's frozen right after it's picked, and it's picked at peak freshness. So all the nutrients are retained. So if that's more economical for you, go for that. But really just try to get some vibrant colored foods, and not to say that those are the only foods that you need to eat, but if you can just add them into what you're already eating, especially if you're not used to having vegetables, or you know, if you don't want to make a huge change to your diet overnight, you can just start to add a little bit here and there. Mushrooms are also really good. They have polysaccharides called beta-glucans, which boost the immune system and modulates it, so brings it up or down as needed. So you don't need like the powdered superfoods like reishi and chaga. Those are great if you have them, but any like culinary mushroom will be just fine. Garlic
does it matter if you have it raw or cooked, or it's still the same?
It's all good. But with garlic, that was the next one. So that for medicinal purposes, it's best to use raw. And when you smash it, and let it sit for like 10 minutes, it increases the medicinal compounds in there. There's a chemical reaction after you smash it. So that's best used if you're looking for, so it's antiviral, it's antimicrobial. If you're looking for those benefits, raw is best, but you're still going to get those benefits whether you cook it or not. It's just a little bit more potent when it's raw. And then I would say fermented foods too. So things like yogurt, tempeh, kimchi, sauerkraut, things like that. Those are probiotics that are good for our gut health. So I'm sure a lot of people already know stuff like that. But the reason gut health is important for immune health is because our immune system lives in our gut. So 70% of it actually lives in our gut. So a healthy gut is a healthy immune system. So yeah, those are some of the foods I would try to start incorporating into the diet. And they're not going to like cure you from coronavirus. Definitely not. But they, like, the more you start to incorporate them into your diet, the stronger your immune system will be.
What if anybody watching did get sick or know someone who was sick? What recommendations would you give of foods to boost their immune system if they have the virus?
So if they have it, you already have it. So whatever you're eating, it's not going to do too much. With the virus, you sort of just have to ride it out. But, you got to isolate yourself, keep washing your hands, stay away. But there's some herbs that you could use if you do have it. Again, it's not like a cure, but it can perhaps help you along a little bit. So one thing that you can do is do like an herbal steam. So you could use thyme in particular is a good one. It's antimicrobial, and also it has an affinity for the lungs. So it works, it's particularly good for respiratory issues. So one thing you can do is sort of make a tea almost. So you would boil some water and just put some thyme in it, and take a blanket or towel, put it over your head, and just breathe in the steam. So it can, thyme, herbally, it works like topically. So the way you can get it topically in your respiratory tract is by breathing it in. So that's a good way that you could try to, help facilitate recovery. So like I said, not a cure at all, but something you could try to just help it along.
And vitamin C is also a really great immune boosting supplement that you can have. I know everybody knows citrus foods, you can get vitamin C. Are there vegetables that are good sources of vitamin C as well?
Yes. So different sources of vitamin C, bell peppers, Brussels sprouts. So these things, we always think like oranges are like the main source, but, there's vegetables, or bell peppers actually have more than citrus. Not that they're not a good source, but it's just, it's funny that we just always go to oranges. But yeah, you could definitely get them from like the vibrantly colored vegetables that I talked about.
Wonderful. So I know a lot of people do have access to Amazon. They're buying supplements on there. If supplements are available to purchase from Amazon, which ones would you recommend for immune boosting?
So I would recommend, there's glutamine. So that's really important for your immune system. Vitamin C, of course, vitamin D. What else would I say? I don't typically recommend a lot of supplements just because I like to focus on diet first. But those are definitely ones that I would start with.
And of course, washing your fruits and vegetables when you go shopping is so important right now.
Yeah.
So you don't get sick while trying to be nutritious as well.
I said glutamine. I meant glutathione. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I wouldn't know the difference.
Just want to make sure people are taking the right thing. Zinc is another one. Zinc is, it's involved in virtually every aspect of the immune system. So that's another one that would be good.
I've actually done the herbal steam, and it's definitely, like you said, it's really great to focus on clearing up the respiratory tract. Even if you don't have anything going on, just if you go outside and come home as a protective measure, that's one thing you can do just to keep your body healing and open and healthy.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good one.
let's see, I think those are the topics that we were going to discuss about. I did have one question from one of our followers. In terms of non-dairy milk, a lot of people are trying to buy non-dairy just because it lasts a little bit longer. Is there a difference between oat milk, which is really popular now, compared to almond and coconut milk in terms of nutrition?
In terms of nutrition, honestly, no. They're not really a good replacement for dairy milk in terms of the nutrients. Like you wouldn't find the same nutrients in oat milk as you would in cow's milk, for instance. But, functionally they work just as well. So if you're using it in baking or putting it in your coffee or tea, things like that, it'll work. But in terms of the nutrients, you can still use those things, but it doesn't mean you have to miss out on their nutrients. So we think of the main nutrients in milk as like calcium and vitamin D, right? So vitamin D, it's mainly found in animal foods, so you can get it from those sources. You can get it from the sun, of course. Also, mushrooms are a good source, a plant source. And then calcium, leafy greens actually have plenty of calcium. So spinach, collard greens, kale actually has more calcium than dairy. So you don't have to worry about it, like especially if you're vegan and you're not having dairy at all. You can just get your calcium from leafy greens, some nuts, some legumes. So yeah, there's different ways to get the nutrients if you're not getting them in dairy, but you can still use those alternative milks and not have to worry.
Yeah, I know oat milk right now has become very popular, and I had never tried it, but a lot of people are trying to find ways to have that dairy substitute, but none of them are really as good a calcium source, like you said, as the other foods that you mentioned. In terms of people trying to create a relationship with sugar, this is another question that I got. What would you tell people, advise them in terms of avoiding sugar or sugar substitutes they can use in their meals when baking or just in their food?
So I don't usually tell people to avoid sugar because, normally when people are asking about how to quit sugar, it's more just how do I adjust my relationship with sugar, because no one really wants to quit it, right? We all want it because it's good. So it's more about just focusing on, how you're using it. So asking yourself, if you're craving it, is it emotional? Like, what do I need right now? What emotion am I actually feeling, and how can I soothe that instead of food? And sometimes food is the answer, and that is okay. And it's more just about, getting curious about your habits and, just that awareness in general, like understanding your emotions, understanding where cravings are coming from. That's a huge thing. Just having that awareness is the biggest piece. What was the second part of your question?
I don't remember. Pretty much touched on it. I think what you said, awareness with food.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you mentioned sugar substitutes. So I also don't usually advise those unless, you're dealing with a blood sugar issue or an issue of bacteria or yeast in the body. But I usually just tell people, just have the sugar. Give yourself what you want, because otherwise you're just restricting. It's emotional restriction or mental restriction and physical restriction. But you have to be careful. Like if you are using the sugar substitutes, for instance, like the sugar alcohols, like 𝗜𝗚 is one of them. Sometimes, or depending, I think everyone's different, but it can cause digestive upset if you're having a little too much of that. So I know monk fruit is a good alternative sweetener, and often that is paired with a sugar alcohol. So just if you are using that, just take note if there's any digestive issues, gas, bloating, anything like that, because that could be a possibility.
That's a good idea. Actually, I think for anyone, having a food journal, just so you pay attention to if something you're eating makes you feel bad or puts you in a bad mood, what it was, and realize that you need to be aware, like you said, of our relationship with food, no matter what it is.
Yeah, totally. Because if you keep a food journal, you can see patterns like that you never noticed before. You never would have noticed if you hadn't actually committed to paying attention. So Yeah, I have all my clients do that in the very beginning, just so I can see where they're at, and they get a lot of good insight out of it because I'll have them do their food and their mood. So they'll notice like, oh, I ate that food when I was feeling this way, or that food made me feel this way. So like vice versa. So it's a good way to get that awareness piece.
And I think right now, going back into the quarantine and emotional eating, having that journal and writing down can help calm down anxiety with being at home as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that answers all of my questions. If anybody watching has questions for Kristen, go right ahead and write them in the comments. I will definitely leave your information in a future post for anybody who wants it. I will pass along her contact info for you if you have questions for her, or if you want to work with her, or if you know someone who wants to work with her, go right ahead and contact either one of us. Kristen, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk about Good Witch Nutrition, and everything that you gave was very informative, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to work together.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I am going to... There we go. Thanks, both of you. You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for watching.
Yes, and we will be in touch soon. Have a good night, everyone. Be
Bye.
safe and be
healthy.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.